Hi, I'm Chad, and you're watching Squarebody Stuff. Still making more headway on our little 339 stroker build. Last video, I got all the rings file fitted. They're ready to go. Now my next step is I'm going to go ahead and put all of the oil galley plugs, little miscellaneous stuff in the block, oil filter adapter, little things like that. And we might go ahead and get the crankshaft stuck in there, but I don't have any gaskets, or for the lower gaskets. I had the head gaskets and intake gaskets, because they were something that didn't come in a regular kit. But I thought I had another complete gasket set with the rear main seal and all that other stuff, but I don't. So I can't put the crankshaft in there for, permanent. I guess I could put it in there and just pull the rear main cap back off once I get the gasket kit in. It should be here tomorrow. Not a big deal. But I'd like to go ahead and get the crankshaft in there and start and make sure that my windage tray, get that all set it up. I haven't mocked that up yet because I didn't have the windage tray studs. I had to wait for those to come in. I've got those, so we've got plenty of stuff to do on this. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through putting the galley plugs in, the ones to watch out for, and a couple little modifications you could do to help with the oiling and stuff. So stay tuned. One of the modifications I do is the front galley plugs. I drill a little bitty hole in them, about 30 thousandths to 40 thousandths hole. It's not a fun job. It's not an easy job. I mean, it's not bad, but it can be time consuming, and especially if you break the little bitty bits. But it's one of those things. The reason I do it is kind of twofold. One is extra lubrication to your timing chain. Also, these holes being at the front of the oil galleys, if there's any air trapped in there, it'll push the air out to here, so you don't have a airlocked, or it'll help the pressure pump up faster. So that's two of the reasons why I do that. I'm not the pioneer of it. It's just another trick I've learned throughout the years. Also on this block, I did open up all the oil galleys a bunch. Well, not a bunch, but drilled everything, made everything a little bit oversized. So to get more oil flow, I am going to be running a high volume oil pump. So that should take care of any of that. The oil filter adapter is just a billet one from Summit Racing. No oil filter bypass, so I'm always getting filtered oil to my engine. So let's get to putting some of these plugs in here. And the one I start with is, and I don't tap it or anything, but it's just a little plug, and I'll show you where it goes. It's probably the most important one, because if you forget it, yeah, things don't go well if you forget this little guy. Now where that little plug goes is right in this hole underneath your rear main cap. It separates the oil coming from your oil pump, going to your filter, and then going to the rest of your block. This is a divider, if you will, and it's very important. Just drop it down in there, tap it down. You don't want to go too far because you can block off another oil passage. So you just got to get it down in there just a little ways and make sure it's seated good. And with this guy, I usually put just a little dab of red Loctite around it, just to help seal it and to hold it in there, because you do not want this thing to come out. Just a little extra precaution. You don't need much. Now if you look through this hole above your oil filter, boss, you'll be able to see that plug once you start driving in there. I'm not going to be able to get a light and a camera and everything in there for you guys to see, but you'll be able to see that plug starting to come through just a little bit, and that's when you need to stop. You got to make sure it's below that hole coming from the oil filter, or to the oil filter, and above the hole above the oil filter, which you can't really see in there. I've got it just far enough where it's not even sticking out. And while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and put the oil filter adapter in place. Let's put a little bit of oil on it. And with this adapter, you want to make sure that that notched part is going from your oil pump. Another thing I'd like to note, these block plugs for your coolant passages inside the block, the water jackets, I've already got plugs in these. Normally I run a petcock valve or a drain valve on these, but this block is half filled with hard block fill. So I had to keep these plugged off, and they're the way they are. Now, the next one to move to is the one above your oil filter boss. And on all these, I just use some thread sealant with PTFE. Don't get carried away with it. You don't need this stuff getting into your oil, but just a little dab around there will help. I've also used RTV, just something to seal those threads off. Don't use thread tape. Never use thread tape on anything like this. All right, now we'll get this plug and these 3 plugs. On the middle one, you want to make sure you don't go in too deep, so it blocks off the oil passage going to your rear cam bearing. And if you want to, I like to stake these with a chisel just to make sure they don't back out. Now this hole up here will go to my oil pressure sending unit, so I'm not going to put anything in it yet. I'm going to put the small one in the front port. You can run your oil pressure sending unit off of this port also. I usually run it off the back, just kind of keep it cleaner. Now the same thing goes for the front ones as the rear ones. To make sure you don't block off the holes that's inside there going to your cam bearing. That will cause issues. Now I might have some issues with this plug. It's sticking out just a little bit. I hope I don't have any issues with it hitting my timing gear. I think I'm gonna grab it real quick and see if see where I'm at on that. Oh yeah, we're gonna have plenty of room. Another reason I like to have these oil holes up here for extra lubrication. This particular gear has a Torrington bearing on it, so be less drag on that. This guy, which is the rear cam bearing plug, goes on the back of the block. I'm gonna wait to put it in for when I pull the block off the stand to put the flywheel on there. That way I don't have to take it on and off a couple times. I'll just wait, make sure I have this thing handy so I don't forget it. It's happened. All right, I went ahead and kind of jumped ahead. I've got the bearing halves in the block. They're all cleaned up, dried. I don't like to have any oil underneath the bearing halves in the block, so everything's dry, everything's clean. This is your last chance to make sure everything is as clean as you want it to be. I've also got the crankshaft all cleaned up, ready to go. I've taken a small brush, went through every hole, and made sure there's nothing in this crankshaft that's going to cause any problems. Everything's clean, smooth, ready to go in. So I'm going to put a little dab of assembly lube, which I like to use this Lucas assembly lube. I'll put a little dab of that on my bearings and set my crankshaft in there. And then I'll get to working on cleaning all the main caps and the bearing halves that are in the main caps, get all that nice and clean. I'll take my new bolts and I'll clean them too, make sure everything is perfectly clean, get them all set out on the table, and dry it off. Everything's all cleaned up, ready to put into the block. I've got all my studs lubed up on the threads that go into the block. I like to use the fastener lube instead of Loctiting them or put them in with just oil. Personal preference, you can Loctite them. ARP says that you can Loctite them if you want to. I'm going to get everything all lubed up, put in this block, get torqued down, and we'll see how this windage tray fits. I know I said earlier I was going to torque everything down. I'm going to wait to torque it down to spec until I get this thing fit up, just in case I need to pull it back apart for some reason. But what I did do is just go ahead and torque them down like 20 foot-pounds. That way everything's seated. And one thing you need to do, remember whenever you're torquing down the main caps, once you get to the rear one, torque it down to this first setting, 20 pounds. That's what I normally do. I usually do 20 pounds all over, and then from there I go to 40, 60, 80. These are 80 pound or foot-pounds, so that's how I normally do it. But on the first step, you'll need to tap your crankshaft forward to get your rear main bearing set for your thrust. That way you don't have any issues with your thrust bearing. So now we're going to do the first test fit of this Meladon windage tray, and of course it don't quite fit perfectly. The holes are a little bit off, but that's not a big deal. This is just a stamped piece of steel, so I will probably just drill the holes out a little bit bigger and go from there. And I think I'm gonna have some issues with it fitting around my oil pump also, but we'll figure it out as we go. It took a little bit of whittling, but I got it to fit. I had to clearance around the oil pump quite a bit to get that to fit. And I also had to notch out for the hole to make sure my dipstick would go all the way through, because it was just hitting the very edge of that hole, and sometimes it would actually go up on top of the windage tray and scoot up underneath there. So made some clearance for that, but that all works out good. And so far it clears the crankshaft. Hopefully it'll clear the rods. If not, I can always take it back off and clearance it for the rods. Now I didn't have this windage tray or the studs or anything. Last time I had this, the crankshaft, the rods and everything mocked up in here, I would have done that. I would have done this then. But it's not a big deal. We'll get it figured out. The only other problem I'm gonna have is my oil pan that I've got is deeper than a factory oil pan, and I'm gonna have to get a different sump from my oil pump, which is no big deal. That could be done at a later date. I'll have to look and see what I can get that'll work. But other than that, so far, what we've got done so far is looking pretty good. Well, that's about all I got time for tonight. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off. I appreciate all of you watching and supporting this channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, or go buy me a coffee. There's a link down below. You can donate $5 to buy me a coffee. It's just a way to support the channel and help pay for all this stuff that I do. That's just part of it. But thanks again for watching. Until next time, y'all keep your square bodies rolling, and we'll catch you later.